To preface this review, I must admit that throughout my childhood, I grew up reading and watching the Harry Potter books and movies. More so watching the films throughout my entire life. And as far as reading the books as a kid, I only ever got to the beginning of the fourth book. Now, just a couple months ago, I did actually reread the books all the way through. At least to what I could stomach anymore. Now, everybody always told me the number one thing when it comes to source material adaptations where the source material is way better than what was adapted was Harry Potter. From books to movies, people always said the books were so much better. I really liked the movies. The movies did a phenomenal job telling the story that it needed to tell from the first year all the way to the 8th year, I believe, and they split the last year into 2 parts. And halfway through the story, it became much increasingly darker because of the maturity in the storytelling. Now, the books, I like them, but I like about the first half of the books. And even the first half, I have huge gripes with the first half as well. The first 2 books, great stories. Writing is dog shit. It's super immature, super adolescent. J.K. Rowling was a hack writer to begin with. But the first 2 books are very solid stories and an epic world that is introduced to us. The 3rd book and the 3rd movie, hands down, absolute greatest story, greatest book, greatest movie of them all. 10 out of 10 for just the 3rd year alone in every aspect. 4th year, Goblet of Fire, film was so much fucking better because it took all of the woke storylines, such as Hermione in the book going around screaming about slavery against the elves, even though everybody, including the elves, are like, we like this life. The film completely rid all of that storyline from the book. And then that already put a huge sour taste in my mouth just from reading those parts, because that's a majority of the 4th book. And then I got about a quarter of the way through the 5th book, and they started just destroying even Harry's character in the book, which is really odd considering all of the films. I enjoy all of the Harry Potter films through and through, all together equally. Now, some films are definitely told a lot better, such as the 3rd year compared to like Order of the Phoenix, which is just kind of streamlined extremely. But they're all solidly made films. The books, not so much. The books are kind of dog shit, other than the 3rd year. Now, we get to Hogwarts Legacy on PS5. Hogwarts Legacy, which admittedly does start and introduces us to the game in such a sporadically random way where you would think starting as a 5th year and being introduced into Hogwarts, you would think it would just kind of be trolleying along into Hogwarts on the train or whatever, and then being sorted and going from there, just kind of living the life as a Hogwarts student, which for the most part, you are that in the game. But the introduction, it's more so you're with Professor Fig already, and you're traveling to get to Hogwarts, and then some crazy random shit happens, people die, and then you make it underground, you make it to Gringotts, you go here, you go there, and then you finally make it to Hogwarts, and then that's where the entire game and story starts and progresses. Now, the number one thing that I can say about Hogwarts Legacy that I absolutely fucking love with no problems whatsoever, the world and the map. Huge as fuck. I did not expect the mapping to be this giant for not really an indie developer, but not really a mainstream developer either. Portkey Games. I will commend them. The world is huge, and I mean like Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, or even The Witcher 3 huge. Hell, I'd even compare it to God of War Ragnarok's world. It is huge for a game like this where it was hyped up by a lot of people, but it was also not really a mainstream game. It's a huge map. It's a huge world. And because there are castles and houses and dungeons and whatnot, there is some variety in the world as well, and I do appreciate everything having to do with the world and the environments. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure that's where my praise completely ends, because this game starts out okay. It kind of introduces you in an action-packed way, which is fun for it being a game. It makes sense. But once you get into Hogwarts, you get sorted, you start realizing and seeing all the flaws that this game has to offer, such as the main one being the story. The story is fucking boring. There's, other than attending classes like a normal student, which even then, they completely take control out of your hands, and the only thing that you do in class is you just move the toggle stick around to reenact how to do a spell with your wand. But even then, it's not really you learning shit, it's just you kind of just retracing what you're supposed to do one time, and then you learn that spell. I do enjoy the classes inside of this game because they do feel actually like you're in the School of Witchcraft, that being Hogwarts, as well as other places of the land and world. There's even Hogsmeade, and then even Hogsmeade, you go up and up and up Hogsmeade, and then down, 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 lower than Hogwarts. It's a huge world, and I will completely commend them for that. But the story, hell, the gameplay is super mundane. It's extremely repetitive. It's fun for the first 2, maybe 3 hours, and then you start realizing this isn't timed combat. This is just very adolescent combat in the form of not hack and slash, not timed, just hit a button, you damage them. Now, they do try to implement some things in the combat to make it feel like a timed combat, kind of like Dark Souls, but it's not really that at all. Like, for example, it shows you slowdown parts where you're to hit triangle and that deflects and counters attacks, when in reality, you could do that, or you can just press circle and dodge. I mean, no matter what, you don't really screw up. It's not really that hard to go through this game until the last act of this game's story. And that may be my worst flaw of this. It's that this game's story streamlines you all the way through the story up until like the 22nd out of, 40 quests, where then you go to a straight, unequivocally screeching halt in the story. You go from quest 1 all the way to however many story quests simultaneously and in a row, all the way from that to it just stops you and makes you go and explore and get side quests done and attack people, all for the sake of leveling up. That's one thing I don't like in games. It would make a lot of sense if they force you to do that on the hardest difficulty, because, yeah, that would make a lot of sense, making you want to explore the world. But when you're on anything easier than the hardest difficulty, you should be able to just play through the story. And that also means that there's balancing problems, because like I said, the story is streamlined straight through from the first quest to 2/3 of the story, and then it stops you and then forces you to go and do everything just for the sake of leveling up to be able to unlock the next story quest. And then you do that, and then rinse and repeat for the next quest, rinse and repeat. It got extremely tedious. And if the activities were exciting, if the story was worth it, okay, sure, I wouldn't have a problem. Problem is, nothing is worth it. The side quests, the main story, even the character development, it's garbage. For example, part of the side quests is Sebastian Sallow, and most of his storyline, his entire storyline is all about dark magic and learning it, but it's not in the kind of predictable story that you would expect. It's more so about him having to like save family members and learning about his history of his family and, his family's illnesses and stuff like that. That's probably the most interesting aspect of Hogwarts Legacy, at the very least the side quests. But even then, the storytelling of it is abysmal. Sebastian literally will talk to you. He will talk your ear off for like 5 minutes explaining how, I don't know, his aunt died, and you explore and find out how his aunt died, and it seems very exciting on paper, but when it's actually happening, like even when it shows you flashbacks, everything is just not entertaining at all. Everything is told in such a boring and mundane way. Just everything about this game is mediocre. The visuals, hell, there are times when this looks actually right up there as a PS5 game. Not so much like God of War Ragnarok type of visuals, but you can tell sometimes that it looks like a PS5 game. Other times, most times, it looks like a PS4 game. Sometimes it looks like a fucking PS3 game. Now, that's not the visuals having a diminished effect of the frame rate or anything. The visuals and the frame rate actually stand tall. Like, there isn't really any pop-ins or anything of that nature. It's just everything as pre-rendered, it just looks bad. Especially the character models. Like, the first troll that I encountered, like, the first hour or two into the game, I saw the troll and I was like, oh, so enemies are going to look very bad in this game. And it's not that they looked muddy or anything, it's like the designers didn't really want to do shit with the enemy models. Now, the main characters and the side characters around you, they look pretty good, but the enemy characters and just everything in that nature, they all look very mediocre. Not bad, but like PS3 level mediocrity in the visuals. And if this were a PS3 game, obviously that would be fine. But, you know, we're almost 20 years past the PS3 release. So there's that. I don't have many good things to say about this game. I have a lot of bad things to say about this game. It took a shit ton for me to finish this 15 plus hour game that should have really only been at most a 10-hour game with a bunch of side quests, exactly like Santa Monica Studios did with God of War Ragnarok. They just let you do the story and then you can choose to do anything after or even during. Hogwarts Legacy forces you to do everything. Not even the whole way through it. They force you to do it in the last act, and I guess that's their fuck you're not going to finish this game kind of thing. And like I said, if this were like Final Fantasy VII, where you always had the choice to do side quests, and you left an area to go to another area, there would be more side quests, but it never really pounded into you to have to do them, then this game's storytelling would have been fine. And I'm not against doing side quests or any kind of side activities. I'm against being forced to do it during your main story run through. That's my issue, because my philosophy is you play a game on the easiest for the story, and then the hardest for absolutely everything. Get a nice feel and experience of the actual game overall. And also another negative, the broomstick flying. I don't know why. The camera angle just always felt so goddamn off. Like, you would be flying straight, but the camera would be like up here, and it would make you feel and think that you're like going down or going up too much, or just everything. Everything just had so many little bugs in it that it wasn't unplayable. It just annoyed the shit out of me. Everything about this game. I enjoyed it the first 2 or 3 hours, and then I realized that's really all they had to offer after that. Then you spend about 15 plus hours doing the exact same thing over and over until, oh, no, wait, screeching halt, now you have to grind. And honestly, this was the very first game that I wanted to pay microtransactions to level up just to be able to finish the storyline first. And then I realized that, oh, so this game doesn't have microtransactions, which I guess is a good thing. Okay, hurrah. But now I'm forced to do all of the extra shit that I shouldn't be having to do on the story run through. So at least there was a positive that came out of that. No microtransactions, at least not yet. Overall, for me, Hogwarts Legacy, it's not terrible. It's just incredibly lazy. The writing's not bad. It's actually decent. It's the storytelling. Everything about the storytelling and just the design of the game is just mediocre to plain bad. And like I said, the visuals, sometimes it looks PS5, which I'll commend those parts, but I'm not going to commend the entire game for those little parts, because the game is supposed to look like a PS5 game when you're playing it on a fucking PS5. And then all of the boring, lazy storytelling devices that they used, it's also kind of directionless and aimless every here and there. Just, the story was just so boring, it didn't feel like you accomplished or did much of anything throughout. You were just kind of exploring, meeting characters, doing tasks for and with them, and then that's about it. And then, hey, flying here and there, and then planting screaming things, like once or twice. They had aspects of going to school at Hogwarts in it, but it wasn't nearly as much as they needed to have in it for it being a game based around being a student at Hogwarts. It's kind of like they love Harry Potter and they wanted to make a Harry Potter game, but they wanted to make their own create your own character RPG game, which is fine, but they took all the story beats from the Harry Potter story, implemented them into this game, and then really toned down on the entertainment value. So overall for me, Hogwarts Legacy, I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Just extremely average. It's nothing to boast about, but it's not really a game breaker or anything. There aren't game-breaking glitches or bugs. I honestly didn't encounter anything like that, so it is at least average because it plays well enough and the frame rate works. So 5 out of 10, Hogwarts Legacy. Thank you.